So today's Dharma talk is on the sixth ox herding picture. What is it? Sixth ox herding picture, riding the ox back home. I just paused because I changed it here, but I didn't change it there, so I got confused. Last week was taming or tending the ox, and this week is riding the ox back home. So the verse goes like this: following the winding road, you ride the ox home. The sounds of your flute mingle with the crimson sky. The feeling is unbounded. Who else could know about this endlessly pleasurable taste? Another line, this last line is just, the feeling is unbounded beyond lips and mouth. So the emotional tone quality of this sixth stage, it's free, it's unbounded, it's indescribably pleasurable. Even maybe the word pleasure is too much to say. It's just a sensation of freedom, vastness, and even mastery, which you can't even put words to. To remind us of the prior stages on this map of our spiritual journey. In the first stage, we were confused and lost. In the second stage, we were adventurous and exposed as we saw the tracks, got a sense of where we were headed. In the third stage, we're peaceful, relieved, and inquisitive when we caught a glimpse of the ox and started to be focused in our pursuit of where we were headed. And then as we caught the ox, we became spirited and effortful as we started struggling with our own conditioning, with a sense of how we could actually master it and live in greater freedom. And then last week, we talked about the stage of taming the ox, or tending to the ox, or attending to the ox, attending, paying attention to our true nature, paying attention to the way that we function below our level of conditioning, naturally, intrinsically, that intrinsic level of functioning, paying attention to that. And in that process, which could be a stage that unfolds in years, as we don't necessarily go through, deep breakthrough experiences or brilliant dramatic insights, but we get to know ourselves better in terms of how our egoic functioning shows up in all the activities of our life. This was a stage of concentration, vigilance, and above all, of diligence and devotion to discipline. Right? And it also required us to be very patient. Now in this sixth stage, riding the ox home, the effort of our previous diligent practice has become effortless. The lostness that we experience has become a confident path. The confusion about where we're going has become a certain knowledge that we are headed home, although that home doesn't have a specific place. That's home on the outside, it's a place on the inside. And we have a clear understanding that that is where we're headed, although we're not there yet in this stage. Following the winding road, you ride the ox home. It's a winding road, but the twists and turns are no longer a cause for suffering. You're relaxed. We say that working samadhi functions in all aspects of our life. So we develop samadhi in our zazen meditation. And then as we deepen it in stillness, we're able to bring it more and more into activity, first in simple actions like our Zen work practices, like raking and sweeping and chopping. Things that don't take a lot of cogitation, things that don't require a lot of don't necessarily evoke emotional charges. And then, as we continue doing that, developing samadhi in zazen and in simple tasks, we also learn how to develop samadhi in activities that do require cogitation and do evoke emotional charges, having conversations with people, doing complicated planning and strategy, working collaboratively in teams. All of these things require some thinking, some forethought, some planning, some strategy, and also because it touches into our emotional layers of relationship and intimacy, or in self-worth in some cases. We've got a lot of charges that come up around those things. So how do we bring samadhi to that so that it's functioning through those activities? That's what riding Yatso is doing. All the aspects of our life. But one of the really sweet turns that happen in this stage is that we really know that there's no going back. We've come past the point of no return at this point in our lives. We've been practicing for quite a while. We've been disciplined in our work. We're starting to see, not starting to see, the fruits of practice are starting to permeate all aspects of our life. And we've kind of come to this place where we really know, we don't suspect, but we know that the whole point of this path is to appreciate every step. So why would you go back? Every step, if you go back, that's your path, and that's part of your path too. You realize that. Your path is your path, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're going. No matter where it appears to be headed, you trust that your path, your step, is the path, is the spiritual path. So we have a great trust at this point. An intrinsic trust in our lives and our path. You remember last week, we talked about trust in our commentary. The main kind of imprint emotionally for the previous stage was about diligence and effort. And that to me was the main fundamental in terms of faith, doubt, and determination. It was the determination energy that was most prominent in the previous stage in taming the ox. And now we've come to this place of really riding the ox home, and now faith. This orients more in the faith direction because the diligence that isn't needed as much. It's not the primary orientation. Right? We did talk last week. We had some really rich conversation about the faith element of the previous stage. But here, the emphasis has shifted from diligence to faith really strongly. Daido Roshi comments a number of things on this stage that I like a lot. And one is that he says, this is now like being caught in a vortex of reality and sanity. That's a wild description. It's a vortex of reality. I say we no longer really know what's going on, but we know that we don't know, and we're okay with that. Okay with not knowing. We trust ourselves, we trust the process, we trust our life, we trust, as Daido says, the whole catastrophe. Yeah, this is what it's all about. So in this acceptance of the whole catastrophe, we've decoupled ourselves from our plans, our agenda, or this plot line that we tell ourselves is the story of our life. Our idea of our life is no longer based on that idea, and it's no longer based on our conditioned motivations and desires, what we think we're supposed to do in terms of establishing a career or being financially successful or having a certain type of relationship or raising a certain type of family. All of those aspects that had a lot of sway for us early in our life, we realized that is not the essence of our life. That's not the main point. All those things become much less important. We see through them. And we really see that the tough stuff is the real stuff. I like to say that we no longer desire to substitute a pleasant fantasy for an unpleasant reality. We prefer what is real. We prefer the true. We prefer what is actually manifested, what actually shows up in our life, instead of our idea of what is manifesting. We actually prefer to see truly what is manifesting instead of our idea, our interpretation of what's manifesting, or our desire about what we believe we want to manifest or what should manifest. We prefer the real and the true over all of those things. The real and the true is more satisfying. There really is great freedom in this, and also a relief, because no longer do we have to struggle to meet our desires or to change things to be the way we want them to be. We let go of the struggle, and that's the relaxation spirit that comes through in the verse on the stage. There's another dimension to this as we look out onto the world from this place of surrender to what is, and realizing all the suffering we've caused ourselves by struggling with what is and trying to make it conform to our way. We see that sometimes other people are being driven to follow their pleasant realities over, their pleasant fantasies over unpleasant realities. And we see that that's going to cause suffering for them and potentially for others. So we may be called to name the truth so that they no longer suffer through their pleasant fantasy or cause suffering for others by living in a pleasant fantasy or a pleasant place of denial. So we're motivated to call out willful ignorance and where we see it, especially in ourselves. Where are we denying the reality? Reality of racism, reality of misogyny, the reality of institutional abuse, reality of species extinction, through willful ignorance or denial in our own subtle ways, as well as the ways that other people do that. And we're called and inspired to name that where we see it. Because we realize that way suffering lies. Fantasy leads to suffering because it isn't in alignment with the truth of what is. Daido Roshi says that this stage is where a spiritual teacher is really born, where you're riding that ox back home. And he says this is represented by the fruiting of a plum. So I guess the plum in the Japanese tradition, at least, is the symbol of a spiritual teacher. And in fact, my lineage, as many of you know, is the white plum lineage. It comes from my first teacher, Maizumi Roshi's father, was named Bayan Hakujin, which means white plum. So it comes from his name, but also it has this connotation of the spiritual teacher, the plum. So when one is riding the ox like this, one is in a position to teach by functioning from this internalization of awareness, you know, in all activities of their life. But in the early stages, it can be a bitter fruit. It isn't ripe yet. And that's one of the dangers of this stage is to create a model or a dogma around what one thinks reality is like, or what one thinks other people should be like, or having a strong conviction about what their practice and like how it should go, which usually means a lot like it's gone for them. People naturally put their own experience onto somebody else's experience. So we have this syndrome in spiritual teaching that we call halfway up the mountain, where, you know, someone may have a lot of insight and done a lot of integration work with you know, wisdom and compassion, but still hasn't fully clarified their functioning, still has some ego holdings on. It's not a ripe maturation. They haven't really gone through some of the later stages that we're going to talk about more. So that's a danger to keep an eye out for in others and in yourself. But I'll just conclude with just pointing to the relaxation, the ease, and the surrender that's available after doing the hard work of diligent scrutiny into your conditioning. And to respect the real joy that's available when you come to prefer an unpleasant reality over a pleasant fantasy. Boy, if you really, when you really land there, then this life, which is very full of hardship and pain and struggle, and goes downhill from there in some ways, right? Yeah. Can be such a joy when it's, well, you kind of have this attitude of bring it on. Yeah. It's I don't know, enjoy the suffering, you know, in a way, yeah. Yeah, you really can. When you're committed to the truth, and when you're able to see that within this samsaric realm of conditioning, there's this amazingly wondrous unfolding that's happening that has very little to do with your personal story. And if you just relax and surrender into this universal flow, according to its laws, its dharma, not your story, then let that ox carry you home without you doing anything for it, anything to it. It'll bring you home. That's it.